And so, in this moment, the simple, open remembering of being, just simply being, resting in the presence of being, remembering this simplicity, this openness, the naturalness of just being yourself. That truth is in this presence, in this moment just as it is, this moment that includes everything just as it is, the wide openness that is not differentiating. In this openness, we remember openness, remember the felt sense of being openness, of being here as presence, and recognizing the naturalness of this essence nature that we call true self, true nature, that it is natural and simple to be yourself. That this true essence nature is underneath all of the obscurations, and so very importantly has always been underneath all of the obscurations. We have identified with the obscurations, identified with limitation, and have believed limitation to be as good as it gets. But it's not the truth. The truth is that there is no limitation, that you are not contained in any way, and you are not contained or limited by any story or happenings of the life. Only when believed in, only when identified with, does the story of limitation limit you. When you realize that you are not bound by any story, that you are not bound by any thought, there is a remembering of the unbounded nature of being. And this is the moment, this presence, that you are the presence, the ever-present now. This moment, pure presence, simple, open presence. And this presence is an aware presence, pure awareness. Awareness is aware of the moving, changing, and yet awareness is never touched, tainted, or altered in any way by what moves and changes. And this is the great discovery of the lifetime, is to discover beyond the story of limitation, discover beyond the sense of being someone that is confined to body, mind, a remembering of the true essence nature, the one simple being, the pure, awake light of consciousness, the Christ consciousness, we could say. That we are this light, we are this pure conscious awareness. And in the remembering of this, we open to remember the divinity, the purity, the all-inclusive, incredible, shining glory of what we are in truth. And then every moment is a living celebration, living jubilation of the great glory of heaven on earth, the receiving of the great light, that the great light has been shining inside us all along. We need to be pointed again and again and again. And we are pointed by way showers. We are pointed by different ways that we recognize and open to the illumination. But in every moment we are pointed by our challenges, by our resistance. What we are pointed to by the challenges and resistance is that where we meet an apparent edge, where we meet an apparent limitation, we are being pointed to be pushed to the edge, to discover that there is no edge, that when pushed we go beyond an apparent edge. What a miracle. That if we are invested in our story of brokenness and we do not actually just stop and feel that brokenness, we do not go beyond the edge of a story of brokenness to discover what is unbroken, what is invincible and has never ever been touched by the play of the world, what has never been touched by mind consciousness, what has never been touched by the story. And this is the great glory. The great glory is that we have always been whole, pure, holy. But we are not using these words and creating ideas that have an opposite or are about some kind of exaltation. Yes, there is salvation in the knowing of this truth. The salvation is the remembering of what we have always been and what we are now. It is this graced invitation to open beyond the limited view, to open to a much wider perspective of seeing. And that perspective of seeing opens when we can feel in the heart, in the sense of being, a resonant recognition of what is being spoken of here. And we can courageously say yes and trust that the reason it is recognized and is resonating as an aliveness in the heart is because this is the truth, right? I can feel so excited. It's so exciting, so exciting to feel this resonance that it feels almost unbearable, almost like, can I really stay here in this truth? Can I really get even closer? Yes, you can. But it takes to feel the resonance, which is so alive, so true, that it's resonating at a finer frequency and getting ever finer as we are recalibrated and prepared by the divine through the play of life and the erosion of the sense of limitation, so that we can truly receive the glory of our unlimited nature. Of course, we already are the unlimited, but because we have spent time identified, we have not been using the muscles, let's say, of refinement. We haven't been using our openness and emptiness and subtle perception. We've been perceiving on a much denser level through sense perception. But the invitation is to sense in the subtle perception of consciousness, the truth, open to sense beyond sense perception, open to sense the resonance, the subtle, fine resonance of remembering your true essence nature. And as these words come, the recognition is in the resonance. It's in the resonance that recognizes, can feel the yes, can feel the aliveness in the presence, can feel the resonance, the fine frequency that doesn't need a mind to say, is it, isn't it, yes, no. It's just this roaring silent yes. This is the truth. This is the truth. Do not need to look in any other direction, just right into your own heart, right into the light that is shining, the Christ light that is shining in every heart, every being. It is the divine light of essential wholeness. And we have all been graced with this light, this beaming, shining light. And we are constantly invited to turn towards it and to melt into it, melt into yourself, melt into the shining light of your own true essence nature. We melt in through the light of consciousness, being the consciousness that is consciously aware of its own awake light shining as pure awareness. Awareness is this light. It's the light that is aware of everything. Without the light of awareness, would there be a knowing of anything? Would you even have a story? Right? So awareness illuminates thought, and then thought thinks about thought and thinks that there is only thought, because thought is not thinking about anything else but itself. But when we come to notice, oh, awareness, the great glorious light that is illuminating everything, we start to turn the attention of consciousness starts to turn towards its source, rather than moving in limited patterns as mind consciousness, as body consciousness. Consciousness starts to recognize its unlimited, unpatterned, free-flowing, unbounded nature. And so the subtle perception is the perception of consciousness able to be conscious of itself naturally. And it is before sense perception. It is before understanding. And so it is, of course, before the limited, learned knowledge of the mind. The knowledge of the self is pure knowledge, simple, divine knowledge. It is wisdom, heart wisdom, the wisdom of an infinite heart that has never been bound. So as these words come, it is just the resonance of recognition, where you feel the attunement, alignment, and a harmonizing with the song of silence, opening to the symphony of one communing in the silent, open, awake field of divine resonant being, just opening to remember that you are so fully a part of this wholeness, and you have never been apart from this wholeness, that you have never been divided or fragmented in any way. And it is in the resonance of the presence of being in this moment. We could say your presence, but even to say your presence is just a little tool to bring the attention to the presence, right? Because the presence belongs to no one. There's no one that could possibly take ownership of presence. It's just the presence, and where we recognize oneness with presence is so beautifully in the felt sense of presence. And this is where it can feel like your presence, the felt sense of presence, just being here, still, silent, open, free, resonating at the frequency of truth. The frequency of truth brings an inner knowing that sings, yes, this, yes, this, this, this. And it is before mind, does not need confirmation in the external, does not need permission to be, does not need any kind of affirmation, because it's so pure. The confirmation in the sense of being, the pure knowing, is knowledge, divine knowledge. It's the knowledge of the self, knowing itself. And in this recognition, there is an enlivened sense of stillness, of the still presence, an enlivened sense of being, an enlivened sense of the silent stop that is not only quiet, not just calm, it is perfect peace, perfect peace. And in the recognition of this, let's say in the nervous system, because the nervous system is your consciousness. It's the consciousness. And where it feels to be your nervous system, it's the fine, subtle field of feeling. And the nervous system is the field of consciousness. So here, where there is a felt sense, the resonance, the aliveness of the presence, it's like an aliveness in your nervous system, like you're jingling and jangling and tingling, sparkling and shimmering with the aliveness of presence. And this is the sense of your nervous system, enlivened. But that enlivened nervous system is consciousness, subtly perceiving itself. The fine resonant feelings, the fine frequencies and vibrations are the fine flows of intelligence of your own consciousness. Now, what you are, even the sense of the body-mind that we have imagined ourselves to be, is made out of consciousness. So it makes absolute sense that everything is tingling, everything is jingling and jangling and alive, shimmering with this alive sense of recognition of the finer frequency, the finer resonance of recognition, as if all of the hairs stand on end, as if your ears are pricked up with a deeper sense of subtle listening, as if the eyes are wide open, but you're not seeing and you're not hearing, you're not touching, you're in the subtle sense perception of the finer frequencies within your own consciousness, within your own nervous system. Picking up the frequency of home, of truth, of this, of self, picking up a frequency of a lightness of being, a shining sense, a luminous sense of yourself, simply being natural, free, relaxed. And hear the remembering, oh, this can be a very subtle remembering, or it can feel very open and alive, and it doesn't matter. It it's just about being. It's about this recognition that underneath the obscurations, underneath the karmic obscurations, the conditionings, and the beliefs and ideas that we have been holding about what I am and what this life is and how I have to, and this is the way. There's always been this longing, always been this longing. And this longing is the longing for yourself. Every desire underneath it has a longing for yourself. In a way, everything in the life has been leading to this moment, this glorious moment. This glorious moment is the moment to remember. The moment to remember that you are not the story. You are not the sense of limitation, that in truth, in naturalness, you are unbounded being and you are ever free, that you have never ever been touched by any thought. Nothing has ever touched you. You have been pure, divine, immaculate being all along in true essence nature. There has been a dream. The mind dreamed a dream. And this moment, this holy moment, is the moment to wake up from the dream, to remember the shining light of your natural, simple being in the felt sense of just being here, just like this. You're not changing into something else. It is just about the attention shifting to align, attune with the frequency, a finer frequency, where the remembering is the infinite frequency of unbounded freedom, instead of that denser, restricted frequency of thinking and the story of me and mine and the cycle of desire, of wanting, needing. Here in the felt sense of being, nothing is needed, nothing is wanted. There's just this freedom, and it's immediate and spontaneous. It's always here. It's just an attunement and a relaxation into simply being the being. We cannot think our way into this truth. We can only think our way into more thoughts. Whatever thinking wants to think about, it can only think itself in cycles of limitation. It can only think and think and think, and thinking is a maze. It is to let go of thinking and be. Just to be here. Remember the openness of the alive field, where there is the felt sense of presence, just being this presence. There is stillness here. The presence is still. The presence is still. Unmoving, unchanging. And this is the silence of being, the silence of the heart that is unbounded and free. Such a deep peace here. A deep blissful peace. The awareness here is aware of the moving, changing, and yet so compelled by its own presence that a natural inquiry says, well, what am I that is untouched? What am I that is untouched by the moving, changing? What am I that is ever peaceful in the face of the moving, changing landscape of thinking? And this openness to inquire draws the attention of awareness from witnessing deeper into itself, so that awareness is resting in its purity, just simply aware and awake. Awakeness comes because there is a conscious awareness. Awareness is consciously aware, and it's consciously aware because it's seeing itself reflected in the pure consciousness. Pure consciousness is where the mind consciousness slows and stops ebbing and flowing and rippling. The mind consciousness slows, settles, and creates this shining reflective field of pure consciousness. And when awareness sees itself, there's this awakening, remembering, where awareness sees itself in the reflection of pure consciousness and is so enamored just for an instant to catch a shining glimpse of itself, that the remembering shifts the perspective and sense of identification away from the mind and the body, that the sense of identification and perspective shifts to see the infinite, vast, open landscape of reality. So it all happens here, in the silence, in the stillness. It's like we turn inward to feel our own nervous system. We cannot find this truth in the external, and we have to come to such a depth of stillness, of presence, that the consciousness is refined enough to be able to subtly perceive itself. So it's like we enter into our own nervous system through subtly perceiving our own consciousness, through recognizing the alive presence. As we open to the alive presence, we're letting attention focus upon the subtlety of consciousness subtly perceiving itself. Presence, awake and aware of its own aliveness. So we're redirecting the attention away from the thinking and the mind and the trying and the all of that stuff. We're redirecting the attention to open, to be aware of itself, to open to feel the subtlety of perceiving itself. You can start this by witnessing, watching, seeing the moving, changing. And yet the felt sense of presence is so compelled and pulled into itself that the witnessing that's watching the moving, changing starts to lose its allure, because the sense of the stillness, the presence, it pulls itself into itself. Because of the aliveness, it's drawn into itself. And this is the resonance, the frequency, the finer vibrations that we're speaking of. That consciousness is naturally drawn to its finer frequencies when they are available, when they start to transmit, when consciousness can pick up the transmission and attune to these more subtle frequencies, the consciousness of your nervous system naturally redirects itself to align and tune into the frequencies of the infinite field. And as the nervous system, the consciousness starts to attune to the frequencies of the infinite field, without knowing how or needing to understand, the consciousness starts to be able to recognize itself and attune more deeply to itself. And there is a relaxation. And in the relaxation, a recognition of the naturalness and the simplicity of being. So the resonance is the recognition of consciousness recognizing itself in finer and finer frequencies. And as the attention drops into the finer frequencies, the denser frequencies of mind consciousness that are only kept alive by attention staying with those denser frequencies, when they are not nourished, it's like those radio waves just stop. Those thought waves just stop. They start to settle out. And so consciousness starts to settle out into a finer frequency, a finer resonance. And so your nervous system starts to feel like it's settling out, slowing, quietening. It's actually being very deeply nourished by calming away from that busy craziness of thinking, right? So without doing anything, without even needing to understand, naturally the nervous system starts to feel calmer. You start to feel more peaceful, more calm, more grounded in the presence. And it doesn't matter if there are thoughts that are coming, going, because the consciousness is attuning to the finer frequency. As long as the finer frequency is available, consciousness will attune to it. Now that can come from some kind of frequency being offered, or you can totally attune to your own sense of being. You can totally attune and remember through your own sense of being. Now, it might seem at certain points in this unfolding that it's easier in the company of the frequencies being offered. When the frequencies are offered, there's an ability just to let go and be carried. So in the being carried, you're being carried into yourself by your own consciousness. So your own consciousness is the one consciousness. And as consciousness is settling out, thinking slows, mind quietens, and there's this deeper sense of a resting. And as consciousness is settling out of its limited patterning and constant ebbing and flowing, moving and changing, just settles and settles and settles. And as we bring attention to the awareness, aware of the moment, aware and awake, it's where the awareness is aware It's used to being aware as a witness, watching the moving, changing. So as there's a settling out, and there's not so much busyness, the consciousness, the patterns of consciousness settle out and really come to be so reflective and smooth and open. And then the awareness is no longer witnessing. It's as if the witnessing just looks at the reflective field, and the reflective field like shines back in a way just like where you suddenly get this blinding light beam from the sun where you can't see anything else, but you're carried right into your own presence. It's perhaps a little like that for awareness, to just be blinded, dazzled by its own light, and remember, oh, this is what I am. This is what I am. I'm pure awareness. I am this awake field that is ever free. I have never been that person. That has been a great misunderstanding, that I was limited, that I was stuck inside a body, believing that I was limited. So this sense is of being the awake field, of remembering what I am is vast and free. And there's an immediate, spontaneous letting go. And of course, that letting go is just a natural surrender. And the surrender brings this remembering of who you have always been, your wholeness, the presence, the natural essence nature, the true nature that you have always been underneath that dream that you have been dreaming. Underneath the dream, a recognition, seeing through the illusion of separation, and a remembering of your true essence nature as being unbounded, pure presence, peaceful, and shining, luminous in the remembering of yourself. And so here the consciousness is awake to its own infinite, vast freedom. And the knowing, the simple knowing, is the pure knowledge where the self knows itself, the being knows itself, where you can feel this fine frequency of remembering, that it confirms itself. Your nervous system, your consciousness is attuned to remembering its finer frequency, its naturalness. And there's just a simple settling, and the remembering is so obvious. It's so obvious because you are it, and you have always been it. So as we open and dive deeper into this vast, shining landscape of consciousness, if mind is moving and pulling the attention, it's okay, because it's just the way that it is in this moment. And it's always just to be aware of whatever's happening, to not get identified and stuck in a story, not to be pulled into dancing the small dance, but to be aware, see it. And as awareness, it's like it just opens things up, where you start flowing. The big infinite dance suddenly just opens up to itself. And there's a naturalness in this. that you have always been this one, this shining, radiant one. And it's just about remembering. And the remembering happens always, ever fresh, here now. It's this moment wide awake to itself, this moment wide awake to itself. It's attuning to the resonant frequency of your natural wholeness. And in the attunement to the frequency of natural wholeness, there's a remembering that this is who you are. This is the true essence nature. This is the glory that is shining in every heart. It's not a secret. It's not really hidden. And yet we're so habituated to move towards the ever-changing landscape of mind consciousness and the projection of the world that the mind creates, that we can overlook the glory that is here. Now, when we remember the glory that is here, the glory includes everything. So we cannot explain in words what happens to the world and the projection, because if the mind tries to understand it, it creates stories of fear and stress for itself, which are not the reality, because the appearance remains. The appearance remains, but the knowing of what it all is known in the consciousness. It's known in the wisdom of consciousness. And when consciousness is tapped into its own innate wisdom, it knows everything at a deeper level, and it doesn't rely on beliefs and ideas and concepts, because it has access to pure intelligence. So the knowing of what is true is known in the depths of consciousness as intelligence, as divine intelligence. And the intelligence has a creative flow. The creative flow creates the appearance of the world. So it creates a manifest appearance, and yet really it's always unmanifest. But this is where the mind can get all kind of confused if we speak about this, because it tries to understand within a limited set of information. But this truth can only be recognized, cognized in the intelligence of consciousness. And so the deeper that you come into the remembering of your own consciousness, your own essence nature, the more the recognition of this intelligence starts to just shine. It's like it sings. You could say it makes sense, but it's making sense on the level of resonance. It's like an attunement, a recognition in the fine frequencies and vibrations, subtle perception. So the projection of the mind disappears, but the appearance remains, and it's seen as a divine reality, a divine life. We open and awaken to remember the divine reality. And reality is now. Reality is this moment in the naturalness, in the resting, in your essence nature, that you have always, always been this, that you have never been away from yourself. So you're not even coming back to yourself. You're just relaxing out of the dreamscape. It's like where you go to one of those kind of cinemas where you put those goggles on and suddenly you're in an altered reality. Me and my life is an altered reality. It's not reality. It's a dream. It's a projection. It's like you're living with these goggles of limited perspective that's all about me. It's like you're in one of those little computer games where you're running for your life, constantly trying to hit the dragon on the head and hit the jackpot, get more boons, more things, more desires, right? So it's like that. Living in separation, it's like running through, constantly thinking about the me. What can I get for me? How can I get more points for me? It's me, right? It's all about me. Oh, yes, that. I want that. I want that. I want that. Right? Jumping up here, jumping up there, trying to use your ninja moves to get what you want. But this is just in this moment an invitation to just take off the goggles of limited perspective, open up, clear seeing, clear vision out of the dream of separation. And just in the felt sense of being, simply recognize and confirm that here there is no story, there is freedom, there is peace, there is openness. And in the emptiness, there's a remembering. Oh, a remembering of reverence, a remembering of pure devotion, a remembering of just this utter surrender into yourself, a remembering of the glory, remembering that this life is about service. The life of service is a life of just perpetual surrender into thy will be done. That we're not here to try to control and push our ideas upon an intelligence that already knows how to live, an intelligent life that already naturally knows how to live, that we're here to let go of our protection and let go out of the dream of separation and remember true nature and live in alignment with nature, resonating at the finer frequencies of life that is intelligent life, right? We are intelligent life, pure and simple. We are the living principle, the illuminated principle of unconditioned life, ever free, immaculate. So as these words come, it's not about understanding anything. It's about receiving the attunement in the alive recognition where your nervous system, your consciousness naturally starts to attune and resonate at the finer frequency of remembering, and to really drink in the felt sense of the aliveness of your remembering. Drink in the nectarine bliss of simply being. The nectarine bliss of being is the divine nourishment that comes when you are no longer nourishing the mind and collaborating with the dream. You're nourishing yourself. And this nourishment, my goodness, this nourishment, it's pure nectar. It's so deeply nourishing that it recalibrates the systems, it rejuvenates, it restores, and it refines and cultures the nervous system and the brain, which the brain, it's like the quantum mechanical functioning of our functioning, which is really the intelligence, the unbounded intelligence of our true functioning. So all of our functioning gets upgraded. The upgrade, again, it's upgrading to what was once natural. It's upgrading out of those restricted, crusty patterns of limitation that we've got stuck in. It's blasting away all of the holding patterns, right? Just like a body that hasn't really moved much for a few years. It's going to be tight and stiff, and it's going to feel painful and crunchy and uncomfortable, right? Let's face it, even a body that hasn't moved for a few days is pretty crunchy. So it's like that, right? The whole life has been lived in a limited patterning. And so as the blissful nectarine nourishment comes in, it takes a while for it to upgrade and bring this flowing lubrication. The flowing lubrication is flowing, the divine soma is flowing to lubricate the way of divine remembering. It's nourishing the nervous system. It's nourishing the whole functioning so that the whole functioning can operate closer to its naturalness, and it can refine and be honed to remember more and more deeply and receive finer and finer frequencies. So there's a refinement, and the glory is that all of life is a flow of grace that is bringing divine nourishment. It brings divine nourishment through the transmutation of imagined suffering and transmutating supposed suffering into the bliss that feeds the divine glory, feeds the divine reality, nourishes the divine reality. And then this flow of surrender, So everything that happens in the life, if we don't get stuck in the crusty old patterns of limitation, and we receive the feelings, we receive all of life, we don't get stuck in a story of suffering, we receive the feelings and we transmute, alchemize the substance through the fine feelings, the denser frequencies, we refine it through our incredible divine vehicle of the body that can feel. It's really the nervous system, feeling, opening. We alchemize apparent suffering when it's interpreted and evaluated and storylined. When we just meet it in the nervous system, raw and alive, we alchemize it from denser frequency to subtle frequency. And the subtle frequency can then surrender into itself, divinely surrender into itself, creating a completed cycle of transformation that feeds, nourishes the divine reality, brings a sense of profound opening and clearer seeing, clearer vision, because the finer frequencies can be received in your nervous system by moving away the crusty holding patterns of stress and old feelings, memory, past, right? All that crustiness of attachment to past flows out. It's like purifying the arteries of a congested heart, right? We see all of these images, and really our whole life has to be a process of purifying the crusty fibrotic tissues, right? All the ways that where we create toxins out of what we don't digest, right? What we don't digest, all experience that we don't digest, everything that isn't nourishing gets accumulated in the consciousness as limited patterns, conditionings, toxins, stress, limitation, aka crustiness, right? It's all of this is just going to lurk around. So we have to transmute it all. We have to purify it all by receiving the feelings. We alchemize the crustiness of old stress and memory, my story, my trauma, right? We alchemize it, and we allow more of a flow to come through, more flow that comes through. It flows, it flows, and it purifies the channels, purifies, let's say it purifies the nadis, it purifies the channels and allows this nectarine bliss to flow through, purify, cleanse, and it brings more of a sense of aliveness to our direct experience. It clears away the limitation and all that draws us to identify, right? Memory, it clears it all away. And it also heightens the ability to be able to digest the divine in our nervous system. We can digest the nectarine, the soma nectarine bliss. We can actually digest it through a refined system, and we can see we can see the divine reality in appearance, right? Because the light is being digested and it's creating the appearance of just light, of the divine reality, divine wholeness, right? So everything in the life is conspiring to bring us to such a profound freedom if we can receive the grace, if we can receive the grace of every moment. And what it takes in, let's say, the first instance is being the being and learning through humble presence to face our own mind and not believe the story, to come to such a depth of stillness, of silence, of our own presence of being, that we can face the mind without budging, without being stirred and triggered and reactive, and believing and engaging and collaborating in the story of me and mine, that we can face it. And instead of collaborating in the crusty old story, we allow this process of transmutation, of purification and refinement to happen through the system, the nervous system and the brain, which is the consciousness refining. We allow it through the living of life and meeting the feelings and transmuting through non-reactive discernment, dispassion, right? Dispassion. By not reacting, by not jumping right in there and rolling around in the stickiness, that we hold this resonance of knowing. And in the resonance of knowing, we are we're the vehicle that can transmute the stickiness, clear and purify the crustiness of memory and these habitual, conditioned ways of protecting, that we can let it flow through. We can stand in the knowing of the being undisturbed, while all of the feelings that feel challenging just move through as stress, old stress, old stress, old stress, purifying, refining. And we can let the cycling transmute apparent stress and suffering and conditioning into its finer substance, which is the peaceful bliss of being that then nourishes our clearer vision and nourishes the surrender into the oneness. Lubricates the flow with this light, flowing light. So beautiful, so beautiful. It's happening now. That's why we're speaking of it. So just to allow, it's a natural, intelligent, flowing, purifying, unfolding. You couldn't do it if you tried, right? This, it's even more profoundly free of all the physical systems, and yet it's refining the sense of the physiology for divine transmutation. So this is what's really happening. This is what life is really all about, right? A little bit more than we imagined. So it's all happening. It's all happening, and it doesn't matter. Even if there's identification with mind consciousness, still, this is all happening in the unseen. And that's the miracle. That's the miracle of divine reality, is that it's all just happening anyway. It's all happening. But the more that we start to recognize and attune to the resonance, it's like then we're along for the ride, the fun ride, the adventure, right? Rather than, oh God, oh, another day, another miserable day, right? Oh, what's going to happen today? Oh, right? No, we don't have to play along with that. Oh, we'll just keep on. One day it'll all be over, you know. You live and you live, you try your best, and then you die. I know that's not what it's about. That's not what it's about. It's about opening to the true nature and attuning to what's really going on here, the behind the scenes view through the intelligence of your own consciousness. You don't have to, you couldn't even begin to understand with the mind. So where there's a draw, a resonance, a yes, a recognition of any of this that's being spoken, it's because your consciousness is refining in order to recognize. Even if you're alert to what's being spoken and saying, whoa, goodness me, I'm kind of a little curious about this. This is the consciousness just starting to purify and shake free of some of that crustiness, right? And open. All of life is moving naturally to purify itself, right? The way that it purifies itself is by inviting us to align with nature through being the being. When we come to the being and open to the natural intelligence, we attune with the flow. And this is where we're just in awe. We're in awe of how this life is living itself. We're in absolute awe at the wisdom, the minute wisdom of how this is playing itself out. So it's all about being the being, all about being the being, resting in the being. And as these words come, it's about the recognition in the nervous system of the aliveness, where consciousness is attuning with itself. It's your nervous system attuning to a finer frequency. And as it attunes to a finer frequency, naturally purification will happen. The more that we rest in the being, that we are, let's say that we're sitting and resting in the being, and we're dropping into the transcendent field. It's very, very nourishing. As we are in nature, right? We notice it being in nature. Very restoring, very nourishing, because all of the alignment that is happening in the unseen, in the majesty of nature living itself, right? Life living itself. When we find ourselves in nature, we naturally fall into nature's groove. Nature's groove is a flow of grace and intelligence. And the more that we're in this flow of intelligence, it's all happening in the unseen, right? You spend an hour just in silence in the forest, right? Even if you're walking around thinking about my story, and you're in that monkey old mind, still nature in the unseen is moving in miraculous ways. Now, if you are in nature and you're resting in the being and you're in gratitude and awe, right? Offering up your exhalation to the trees, right? To transmute, right? There's the transmutation process, alchemizing, right? Taking in the oxygen that those beloved trees are offering, right? Taking in the divine nutrients, right? Everything is being mirrored. Everything is being mirrored. The whole flow of gesture is happening in nature all the time. So if we are present in nature, it deepens, right? It deepens that we're in gratitude, with awe. We're not manipulating nature. We're not trying to make nature be the way we want it. We're just receiving the grace and the intelligence. We're aligning with the intelligence, right? We're not finding anything wrong with the way that nature is naturally living. We're aligning and we're recognizing the cycles of birth and death that play, right? We're recognizing these flows of intelligence, how there's this deep restorative quietness that underneath the surface is very alive and just waiting for the right moment to blossom. Divine timing, right? So everything naturally happening in the flow of divinity, in constant perpetual surrender into itself. And it is about aligning with the miracle, aligning with the miraculous, knowing wherever alignment can happen. Alignment happens in the attunement with the resonance and the fine frequencies. The depth of silence, the silent stop, the presence. This is the truth. This is where the discovery of the true nature is. We could say that it's just waiting for your silence. that the divine is right here. You are one with it. It's just waiting for your silence to show you who you truly are. The silence of eternity. The silence of the timeless being, resonating at this fine frequency in its own aliveness. Pure presence, here now, just being. Just waiting to show you the glory of who you are. Just waiting for your silence to discover once again the truth in the silence of your eternal nature.